all for coming tonight. If those of you who were on with us last Monday, had a great turnout and learned lots of great information, had some great questions from the crowd. So tonight will be a very similar night, but different all at the same time. It'll be the same concept. We're going to have some presentations for everyone. We're going to introduce you to the board, to the THRIVE board, all of which are volunteers, and very much looking forward to making lots of great things happen here in town. We are going to go in depth with 6 of the 9 initiatives that we talked about last week with some various board members. And like last week, we will have time for questions at the end. If you think of them along the way, feel free to type them into the Zoom chat. And at the end of the program tonight, we'll go over some questions, some direct questions that can be asked specifically to whichever director talked about a specific initiative or to all of us in general. And we'll invite you to come on camera as well if you'd like to ask your questions. So like I said earlier, I love seeing faces. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid to put your cameras on so we can all see those big smiles on this very humid day today. So thank you all again for coming tonight. We're looking forward to having a great chat. So we're going to start off with Laurie Bruyette. And before we do that, Laurie, actually, I want to just give a quick rundown of the directors with us tonight. We have both Laurie Bruyette and Richard Petty, co-chairs of THRIVE Amherstburg, with us tonight. We also have Sarah Palmer, who I'm not sure if you're here yet, Sarah. I know she's joining us. She'll be popping in a bit later. We have Ron Deno, fellow realtor in town. Great to have you with us, Ron. We have Yasminka Kalajic, who will also be joining us tonight. Dr. Tim O'Callaghan also with us. Phil Roberts with us tonight. Jasmine Hurst, Lisa Porter, Renee Demore, as well as Corey Reno, who is making the magic happen behind the scenes for us tonight as well. So we're going to hear from everybody as we get the night started tonight. So Laurie, off to you.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Our board has been very excited and looking forward to tonight. And I just wanted to kick off everything by talking to you about our mission statement. So in the early beginnings, when we were first talking about getting some type of group together, Richard and I, it was just the two of us at that point in time, and we developed a mission statement based on conversations that we'd had with several people. And that mission statement has evolved with the growth of the board. So our mission is to inspire a thriving community through creating connections between best practices and good local governance. So the values that sprung from that is what developed the acronym for THRIVE: timeless, healthy, relevant, inspired, valued, and engaged. So thrive by definition is to prosper, to be successful, and to flourish and develop. And that's what we want Amherstburg to do.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Laurie. I guess my first question to you, Laurie, is going to be, why is it so important to focus on these values so early on in the process?
Well, I mean, we really have to nail those down right from the start, because not only developing the mission statement, and the mission statement, because it's such an incredible navigational tool, we have to consider what our goal is to be able to move forward. And then the values springing from that, they help us find our purpose. They help us react to difficult situations when we're decision making during our process, and clarifying our decisions, getting rid of clutter.
When we look at these 6 values, Laurie, how do we drive a couple of them? Like what's our plan there?
Well, just very briefly, when we say that we want to be a timeless town, we need to protect our history. We have historically significant buildings, and we have to be mindful of what that history has taught us, and keep it healthy. And in terms of being healthy, we generally think of our physical health, but what about our financial health as a town? Staying financially healthy so we can maintain our infrastructure and maintain our reserves. For relevance, I would say just very briefly that we have a climate crisis. That is relevant. That's front and center right now, and we've declared that in the town. We need to create a plan and execute it.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to bring in a couple extra directors into the chat here before we get to our 6 initiatives. And one of the questions that I know has been asked of myself since joining the initiative with Thrive has been basically why? Why did I personally join? I know we've all been asked as directors, and there's 12 of us. I know for myself, you know, when Lori and Richard approached me, it was all about basically moving the town forward. And as many know, my wife and I have lots of investments here in town. It's important to keep things progressing, and we're on such a great trajectory, I think, with everything happening locally here, that it's important, I know, to me and to many people that I know, that we keep on that trajectory. So I guess I want to ask the same question to Corey and Jasmine. Corey, how about yourself first? Why did you join Thrive?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. For me, I grew up in Amherstburg. I'd moved away for some years, but we moved back here to start our family. I'm very proud of being from Amherstburg. My roots are here. It's a great town, but there are some things I think we can do a little bit better. So as part of Thrive, I think I can actually put some of my thoughts on how to improve things actually into action. So that's a big part of it for me. We have 2 small children, so we're big proponents of many of the Thrive initiatives that we're going to talk about tonight, especially open streets and safe bike lanes. It's very important for my family, for those 2 especially. I'm also an environmentalist. I believe in the science and facts, which are very big parts of the core of Thrive, believing in the science. And I know that everything we do is going to affect the future. So I just want to be a part of the positive change for Amherstburg, especially for my children.
Love that. Thanks, Corey. Jasmine, how about yourself?
Yeah, for me, I also lived in Amherstburg my whole life. But for me, it was the fact that they came up to me and saying how they wanted a youth perspective and want to know what the kids and the younger people of Amherstburg want to actually see and have done, and what they think could change to help improve Amherstburg happen. And that's what really got me wanting to help them out with that.
Love it. Thank you, Jasmine. Ron, you're next up. Ron Deno. I guess I'd love to know, Ron, what are some of your ambitions for the town? You know, you're like me. You're very involved. People see what that we're involved in town. What are some of your ambitions?
Well, the group that's involved here, it comes second to none. There are some very valuable people here, a lot of education and fact-finding missions that are done with this. We haven't had anything like this in town, and I just believe we're on the cusp, as you said, Dan, that this town's going to explode.
Yeah. And
I'm hoping that the explosion kind of follows some science and some education to bring it to where I think it can be. I just wish some people could see what I see heading down the path. And Dan, I'm sure you know that this is just ready to explode, as I mentioned. And we just need the right drivers in the seat. And this thing will take on a life of its own if we allow it to. If we continue with trying to stop it from growing, trying to bring it back to what it was, I just don't see that we could go as far as I think we can. And this group that's here, and I'm very proud to be one of them, I'm just going to watch and listen to some education and throw my 2 cents in and see where we can take it, because it is that big right now. Dan, you know what's going on behind the scenes too. And if we just let this thing go, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, no doubt. Ron, in your opinion, what are some of the things that Thrive can do to help make this all happen?
It's again, it's an educated group. They want to operate on evidence-based science. They don't want to think what might happen. They want to know what will happen. And that's a really good group to be standing behind. They're not out to spend other people's money. They're not out to grandstand. They're out with the true value of what they believe this town will become. When Richard Petty had started talking to me about it, his energy and his enthusiasm is on its own. No one can keep up with that man on what his vision is for the town. And as he said to me, all I want is this town to be better when I leave it than what it was when I was here.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, that's really good.
Awesome. Next up, I would love to introduce a fellow board member, Lisa Porter. So Dr. Lisa Porter, resident PhD, full professor at the U of W, executive director for the WeSpark Health Institute. Again, she's one of those very bright minds that Richard and Lori brought to the board. It makes me feel very inadequate, but we're very lucky to have Lisa with us tonight. Lisa, how would you take the next slide for us?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So it's my pleasure to be here and to tell you all about the next slide, which is about the best practices component. And as you've heard a little bit from Ron and Corey and Dan, you know, when Richard first started talking to me about Thrive, I think there was many things that excited me about the initiative. But what really sold me was when he said that he and Lori had envisioned Thrive being based on best practices and being evidence-driven. And somebody who works in health, and likely some of you on the line also share this, you'll know that best practices is the foundation of healthcare. And it's because decades of work shows that this model is what translates to best health and to people living longer. And that shows that it works. And of course, it can be expanded into other areas besides the areas of health. Best practices, you know, for healthcare, it's obviously a model that's been adapted nationally and internationally. But for best practices for a group like Thrive, it isn't a one size fits all. It's really about identifying a method or a model to identify and solve problems with the goal of gathering evidence and knowledge to drive your next steps forward into action. And so some of the things that Thrive, and while it's still developing and growing, I think one of the things by assembling some directors that have sort of niche areas of expertise, really one of the things that I would tell you is that I know nothing about real estate. I know nothing about business. So we're all non-experts outside of our area, and it takes many people coming together and working together. And that's what the collective is about also. You know, just the directors alone don't have all the expertise. We're non-experts on most things. And so one of the things that, you know, I was really excited to hear is that Thrive is committed to bringing experts to the field and to the table around the areas that we want to tackle. And so really bringing in pragmatic experts, people who have a track record in their field that are well respected nationally and internationally to move us forward. And with those experts, our committee is really committed to identifying the existing practices and knowledge that are out there. And, you know, you could have experts like me who are used to data-driven peer review, bringing peer-reviewed papers and looking at repeatability of practice. But it also takes, you know, some of the expertise of business experts who are really well-versed on outcome-driven practice and rapid adoption of best practices and what's going to be the best cost methods that you could use. We're also cognizant of, you know, not all data is quantitative data, but also qualitative data. The value of lived experience, really that can still be gathered and analyzed in a methodical approach, but it's also important types of data. Also, you know, data that shapes societies needs to represent all people. And so you need people that really think about not just one group, all groups. And so, I know some people, you think about that, and even sort of this for the people model. For the people really is a political statement trying to make people think that we all have expertise. All the people have expertise. We're all the people, right? And what really we want to do is bring that all together. And, I think one of the best things about best practices is it doesn't remain the same. You have to have a model that is able to be evaluated, able to be refined. Sustainability is an important piece, and that you're able to be current and agile. So you're constantly looking at how you can be better. And, a big piece of that is being open-minded and committed to change, being committed to moving forward. And so that's the best practices model in a nutshell.
So I have a few questions for you. So first of all, why, in your opinion, is this discipline so important for Thrive and for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big piece of what you want to do when you're thinking about important decisions, how to move forward, is that by gathering all of the data, it's setting you up for success. There's no sense continually recreating a wheel when other people have done things. So let's learn from other people. That's the smart way to go. But then also recognizing that, can we look and see, from our population, what are our evidence from other places that look like us, that have models like us. And some of it might be even novel data collection, right? Saying, can we bring other pieces of data to the table so we make sure that we are moving forward in the best way. But it's also about, by having a method, it allows you to gather information quickly and make decisions and say, let's have metrics that are going to allow us to evaluate how we move forward and be able to move forward. You don't want to get stuck in a cycle where you're just gathering and gathering data, but not actually making it actionable so that you're going to move forward.
I would assume that, and it might be safe to say that utilizing these best practices should help with, misinformation, various things being, every community has it. Let's be serious. No matter what, what we're fighting for and anything in life, there are the people that just throw out misinformation. Sometimes, not purposely, they hear something and they don't research it and they throw it out there, right?
Or sometimes it's, things like social media is terrible for passing on information. And sometimes it's even, not from the best experts. And so, people that claim to be experts, but they're not experts. And that's why I think when you're deciding on expertise that you're going to listen to, you want to make sure that those experts are pragmatic, that they do have that track record, right? That they are evaluating the data and you have people around them that are going to ask questions. Asking questions is important. You just don't want to get in a cycle where you're not being open-minded and you're not listening to the data that's coming forward. It's so important to really go into things saying, I want the best for our community. So we want to look at what data is out there. We want to be open-minded. Then we want to make decisions and move forward.
One last question for you, Lisa, before I let you off the hook here, but of these best practices, do any of them stand out to you? Like, are any of them, something you want to focus on a little bit more?
I think they're all important as a package because they all feed off each other. And I think that's another reason to have a group of people working together, because different people bring sort of a focus. I would be maybe more the peer review data person, but there's going to be people that have different expertise and different strengths. And so bringing everybody to the table helps to make sure that your model is working as effectively as it can.
Awesome. Great job. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Dr. Lisa Porter, just fantastic information. And again, if you have questions that you've thought of along the way, feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll get to them later on in the session here. We'll keep on going, and you can also ask your questions live on camera if you want to as well. You can stay off camera and just have your microphone on. Next up, I'm going to invite Dr. Tim O'Callaghan for our next slide. Hi, Tim.
Hi, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. Okay, so Corey, we'll get to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk about a couple of our placemaking initiatives that we've identified from the THRIVE board. And near and dear to my heart is active transportation, which really is another way of saying cycling. So I'm bringing a health lens to the board, but I'm also an avid cyclist, and I'm seeing some great changes in our community already when it comes to cycling. And I want to be part of helping shape things as that moves forward. All the time in my practice, I'm dealing with patients that come in with chronic diseases, and we're working on ways that we can make those chronic diseases better. So how do you manage things without medication? We talk about lifestyle management, and that essentially means your level of activity and what your diet looks like. And so constantly having these conversations about getting out and being more active. Why more active? And I think it's pretty universally known, but I'll just point out that physical activity has a lot of benefits. So it decreases the chance of developing in the first place a whole bunch of chronic diseases. Things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and obesity are all linked with physical activity. And so increased physical activity decreases the chance of developing those things. And not only that, but if you develop problems, chronic diseases, part of the management of those chronic diseases is increased physical activity. Besides just the impact on chronic diseases, we know for a fact that being more physically active actually extends life expectancy. And so depending on the level of physical activity, life expectancy goes up for about 1.5 years for people that are moderately physically active. And those that are quite physically active, life expectancy goes up over 3 years. So that may or may not sound important to you. And I guess quantity of life is certainly important for people to think about, but it's also the quality of life as well. And I think if we envision someone that's physically active on a regular basis and enjoying what they do, their quality of life increases. And there are studies that have looked at quality of life surveys for those that are more physically active and identify a huge benefit to increased activity. So that's just sort of my medical segue to say that physical activity is important. I think most people know that already, but wanted to try to point some of those things out. During COVID, many communities actually looked at active transportation and specifically cycling as part of their response in their COVID action plan. And that has caused other communities to vastly expand their cycling networks. And I think we're seeing, if you're driving around town lately, driving south of town between town and Highway 50, you'll notice that they've installed cycling lanes on both sides of Highway 20, and that's going to extend, I think, all the way down to Holiday Beach. So that's an excellent example of a step forward that our town is making. Some of the pieces about Amherstburg that make cycling such an excellent fit are that it has moderate climate, really flat terrain, so you don't have to push yourself uphill, which if you've been to other areas in the province or in the world, it's a lot harder to cycle. It's really easy to cycle in Amherstburg. We've got proximity to wineries and to the Chrysler Greenway as well. In other areas, as I said, the cycling grid has greatly expanded and cycling lanes have expanded. And some of the things that Amherstburg needs to do moving forward is to really look at planning out an enhanced cycling grid, one that connects residents with destinations. So we're connecting where people live with parks, restaurants, cafes, wineries, stores, and businesses, I think is really important. To realize that cycling lanes are for cycling and not a nice place to dump a load of gravel for your landscape project, or to put your recycling bins or your waste or whatever. So those are the challenges that as a cyclist I see all the time. And really important for cycling lanes not to end halfway between concessions so that you're going along and it's suddenly stopped. So some proactive thinking needs to happen. In busy areas of town, and I'm thinking especially on Sandwich Street, protected cycling lanes would offer safety for people that that aren't otherwise comfortable cycling with traffic so close. And there also needs to be supportive infrastructure. And I know that the town is working on elements of this, like bike corrals and self-serve maintenance stations throughout town to facilitate people being able to more actively participate. And the other important thing, I think, is trying to connect with funding. So the countywide active transport system is a source of funding. The federal government just dedicated $400 million for active transport. So what are we doing as a town to try to connect in with some of those financial resources to make our cycling grid even better than it already is? So if we can go to the next couple of slides, there's just a few sort of viewpoints. And, you know, you can think about cyclists as sort of, you know, the peloton that you see screaming through the county. But this is the reality. Lots of people enjoy cycling, not just as an athletic pursuit, but as a leisure activity, or they view it as a utilitarian thing. It's, you know, I'm going to actually use my bike to get to the shop to get what I need and get back home. Cycling intersects with so many of the other initiatives that we have, including climate change, streets are for people, and intersects as well with speed. Next slide. There's just some examples of a protected cycling lane in another municipality. And I promise that on future episodes, I'm working on amassing some local cycling photos. So I've got a nice high quality digital camera on the front and back of my bike at all times now, taking pictures and video of everything that happens. So hopefully we'll have some fun things to take a look at in the future. I don't know if there's any questions around cycling before we move on to
I've got a couple
speed.
questions, I guess, for you, Tim, over on cycling. Now, you mentioned you're an avid cycler. Why should this be important for the average Joe Blow who's out there in Amherstburg who's not an avid cycler?
Yeah, again, so the cycling that we've seen in these slides are the kind of cycling that I'm talking about. The cycling that Renee does with her family, where they get everyone, you know, loaded up and on our way, and we're going to go do a fun trip into town. You know, I saw Renee at the Navy Yard Park the other day while I was enjoying a nice ice cream with my kids, and they were cycling. And so it's that kind of connection to a local resource. You know, it's not about a gym membership or something fancy like that. It's getting out and doing something that's right in front of you. And so turning our town into a little bit more fitness oriented.
Tim, can you go a little bit in more detail about the protected lanes? We see pictures here, obviously, but why are those important?
Yeah, so if you can envision, and you know, next time you're driving around on Sandwich Street, there is actually a cycle lane there, but it's right on the edge of a really busy thoroughfare. And you know, the concern is that when you've got a whole lot of stuff going on, that the cyclist doesn't get seen, and you know, someone makes a sudden turn into a business and takes a cyclist out. So the idea of lanes is to really separate out the cycling from the vehicle traffic. And it has actually a traffic calming effect as well. So when you're in situations like this, it actually gets motorists to take notice of what's going on and be a little bit more mindful of those that are using the cycle lane.
Perfect. I'm just seeing a comment here from Patrick. The Parks and Recreation Committee has discussed the possibility of realigning the traffic lanes along Sandwich Street that would include dedicated bike lanes. Thank you, Patrick.
That's awesome.
Okay. Anybody else with questions? I guess we can get to them as well. Darren, I'm seeing dedicated versus separated bike lanes are different. Need to look at safety of cycling infrastructure. Bike lanes are more than a white strip on the road on the side of the right stripe on the side of the road. Yeah, very good point.
Yep. Very
good point. Tim, you also want to tackle our next one?
Yeah, that's right. So this is a testament to the fact that, so I'm certainly not an expert on traffic speeds, but you know, this is one of the initiatives that we picked up. So in line with what we were talking about earlier, none of us here is an expert in everything. I'm certainly not an expert in this. But I'm happy to share what I've learned in doing some reading about traffic speed. And so there's a huge correlation between traffic speed and death and serious injury. I think of a story of, I've had a number of patients involved in being struck by motorists in town. In both of the cases that I can readily think of, neither of those led to death, but they did lead to lengthy ICU and hospital admissions and lengthy rehab afterwards. And you wonder whether a different approach to what we're doing with vehicle speed in town would have mitigated some of that injury. There's a Vision Zero program that was developed in Sweden. And so in Lisa's words, let's learn from others. Let's learn from international best practice. Sweden has done this already, and this is a program that's spread around the world and is in many Canadian municipalities. So Vision Zero really kind of rethinks how we look at traffic speed and traffic-related problems. And it focuses away from trying to avoid collisions and really focuses instead on eliminating death and serious injury. There is a big correlation between the speed that a vehicle is involved in a collision and the risk of death. And lowering speeds, we know, will encourage people also to participate in other activities. So, you can envision that if you're rolling along as a cyclist in a dedicated cycling lane and the traffic speed is slower, you're going to feel safer in that situation. You're going to feel safer walking closer to traffic in that situation as well. Higher speed, really, things can get out of hand. And again, the Vision Zero program focuses on the fact that people make mistakes. Their human error exists, and as a result of that, things are going to happen. But if we can change the system, we can mitigate the risk to people.
I believe our next slide, Corey, if you could switch that over, there you go. Yeah, explains that a little bit further.
Yeah, it really does. And so just sort of taking things through where posted traffic speed limits in Amherstburg are typically 50. A motorist to pedestrian accident in this situation has about an 80% chance of causing death. A 3% chance of serious injury, and slight injury is 17%. If council in Windsor and also in Amherstburg has discussed lowering the speed, imagine what things would look like if we dropped things to 30 kilometers an hour in Amherstburg, at least in the downtown area. The risk of death would plummet. And I think this is really important moving forward.
Awesome. Sorry if you can hear the kids screaming in the background, they're outside. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. And if anybody has questions for Tim, we can get back to them at the end of the session as well. Thank you for all the great info, Tim. Appreciate it. Okay, next up, we have Renee Demore, and Renee is co-owner along with her husband and also resident of the Downtown Espresso Cafe. Hi, Renee, how are you tonight?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How about you?
Very good, thank you. And you're going to talk to us about Streets Are for People.
Yes, I will. So yeah, I'll speak a little bit on more of a business lens, I guess. So streets are for people. I just want everyone to think about those 4 words. Most of the time when we think of a street, we automatically think cars. We often forget that streets belong to the people as well, right? Like the cyclists that Tim was just talking about, rollerbladers, dog walkers, joggers, etc. There's much more to streets than vehicles, and we feel that it's necessary on many levels to prioritize people over cars. We want to make Amherstburg more of a pedestrian and cyclist friendly town. Cyclists are coming from everywhere: South Windsor, LaSalle, Leamington. We get a ton here in Amherstburg, especially in the downtown area. There's many hot spots down there for them. They stop at Downtown Espresso, Caffeine & Co., Happier Camper, just to get that little fuel and pep to get back to where they started from, right? So also the open streets are necessary for a healthy and post-pandemic in Amherstburg. And we're not talking about like closing all the streets down and making people walk to Windsor. When I'm talking open streets, one example of this is last year's open air, the summer event, when they closed off Dalhousie Street for a few months, where the businesses were able to expand their spaces onto the streets. And that created a unique and fun summer event for everyone to really distinguish Amherstburg from the other surrounding towns. And also, it's good for the post-pandemic because we don't know, like people might still be scared to go inside businesses, right? So if we have that extra space as businesses, we don't know if we can only have a maximum of 10 people, 5 people, or if we can have anybody inside at all. So having that extra space outside really, really helps businesses and provides obviously more seating for them. Having the open streets are supported by business data, international best practices, and science. It will generate more revenue for the downtown businesses. So from a business standpoint, the studies prove that local businesses rely on walk-in visits by customers who stumble upon them while strolling without any prior intention on shopping there. That being said, the drivers passing through the town, they might not be motivated to stop and explore. You just keep going. And the fast flowing traffic through your downtown doesn't boost the economy of your downtown. It actually helps people leave the town faster, right? So we also know that the open air event has been approved again for this year by a 4-2 vote or by council. We think the focus shouldn't be on whether it's going to happen every single year or not. I believe that like the open air should be an annual fixture for the town. We need to focus on how it can be adapted and made even better each year and through experience, right? We just trial and error, see what you can do and what you can provide. And the businesses should get really creative and stuff. So perhaps the 2022 town budget could also include investments for street furniture. I know Artisan Grill did that last year. It was amazing. It beautified the downtown. It was so inviting and everyone wanted to go there. They wanted to sit on the lounge, have a glass of wine. So they did a really good job last year. Also, the budget could maybe include a little more entertainment, as well as making conversions more simple and quick to tear down and set up, like automatic bollards. Lastly, a longer term redesign of streets could be possibly closing the far west end of Murray Street permanently. So this picture here, I don't know if you guys can read it, but it says, good cities know that streets are for people, not just for cars. Great cities know that streets are for places to linger and live, not just move through. And this photo does a wonderful example of explaining this. Yeah, and it kind of just leads to the fundamental confusion between a street and a road. A street should be for people to congregate, to shop, socialize, and do all the human things that produce value for our community. And a road should be for more higher speed, efficient connection from two places. I'm going to leave this open to anyone and see if they recognize this town. If you want to unmute and just go ahead and say if you know what this is. Oh, yeah. Okay. I got seen in the chat. Rob said Harrow. Yeah. So this is Harrow. So Harrow just approved a street design of their major street and I think one of their side streets. And this photo here is what Harrow is going to be turning their downtown into. This is a key example how other small towns that surround us are moving forward and investing to make their communities more safe, more pedestrian friendly, and even more beautiful. So there's no doubt that Amherstburg can do similar. So this photo here, it was taken during the open air last year on Dalhousie Street. It was a great time. It got people out of their houses and, you know, roam around freely and explore and enjoy the event. There's a lot of people, and you can see in the top right photo, there is a ton of people. There's a ton of lineups and stuff. And when we're talking about like people walking from one street to another, say you're from, I don't know, I'll just throw out LaSalle, and you're like, okay, I'm going to Salty Dog tonight. Well, there's a big lineup. Okay, you know what? We'll wait and we'll walk around. And then you take a look around and you're like, oh, you know, there's a sushi place here. I didn't know that. So then they end up getting sushi or something and go back to Salty Dog the next day. So it creates more awareness in the area when you're by foot and walking around, and you know, it can help other businesses as well if they didn't know you were there. So performing arts, they're really important for the open streets. In fact, when we presented this slide to Councillor Peru, he really supported this idea. He thought it was really great and agreed with our thoughts on this. So if we invested a little more into performing arts in downtown Amherstburg, this will really animate and activate the streets and really distinguish our remarkable town. It'll create more life down there and more people. And then if you have more people will go into the businesses, shop around, and enjoy our town.
No doubt. Great job, Renee. Great job. So a couple of questions for you, Renee. One of which, you've spoken very passionately about open streets. Tell us about your experience, obviously with the cafe, but like, why are you so passionate about it?
I'm passionate about it because it's, you know, it's really fun, it's unique, and if you, from a business standpoint, if you really adapt and, you know, change certain things, you know, maybe some aren't successful with it and some aren't, but we're kind of hoping that, you know, these businesses can adapt and hopefully see the benefits of the wider community.
What improvements would you like to see for future years?
Well, I guess we would just have to kind of go with the flow and see what works. Like, this is a new event. Like, last year was the first year we ever did this. And, you know, to me and to most, not all, it was very successful. But, you know, if we make some minor adjustments and stuff and just go with the flow and say, hey, this worked this year, this didn't work last year, let's try this, you know, it keeps you moving. It stops from everything from being so stale and monotonous, right? You don't want to go there and do the exact same thing over and over and over. You know, it's everything, you want everything to change. You want new things.
I think for myself, one of the things that I've noticed oftentimes, I'm not sure if it's just Amherstburg or if it's just, you know, when there's two sides to a story or two sides to an issue, is it either, people often think it has to be one thing or the other. There can't be, you know, a workaround or make it work for everyone. You know, I know I would love to see more entertainment, more buskers, more, you know, something to kind of bring the crowds down, as opposed to just the empty streets with the restaurants being out. I think that would definitely help.
Right, I agree with you. And getting those things out will also provide more for the youth and for the younger people, instead of like at night, you know, just sitting outside and having a beer. Like, what about those who aren't of age to drink, and getting like even somebody doing magic tricks or anything like that. They had like the Moore brothers that played downtown last year, and the family, they did a jazz performance, and you know, that was more of a family thing, and it was beautiful. It was packed and it was a good time. I think Councillor MacArthur was down there, and he also plays as well. And yeah, just getting the youth and getting them more engaged as well, and being more family oriented. That's how we can change some things as well.
Fantastic. Great job, Renee. Appreciate it. So Renee DeMoore, if you have any questions for her or for the group, again, just pop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Next up, we are going to talk about climate change with Yasminka Kalajic. Hi, Yasminka, how are you?
Hi, Dan.
Thank you for
really good pronunciation of my name. I'm very impressed.
Did I get it?
I said super pronunciation of my name. I'm really impressed.
I got it perfectly. Kalajic.
That's amazing.
I've been practicing all day. You're up.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and hello to everybody who's joined us. My name is Yasminka. I'm a longtime resident of Amherstburg. We just had our 23rd anniversary, my husband and I, of moving here. I'm a Windsor and LaSalle girl originally, But my husband grew up here and has spent his entire professional life here. He owns a business on Dalhousie. So we are really committed to this town. We've raised our 3 children here, and by the looks of it, since they seem to be permanently camped in our basement or on our living room couch, they are not planning on going anywhere. So my goal really, and my interest in joining Thrive is to help as much as possible, to give some structure to lots of great conversations that are happening all over town. People have ideas, but don't really know where to put those ideas and how to get them to the attention of the people who make decisions. So it's great to be part of a solution as opposed to what I'm often good at, which is complaining about the problem. And one thing that I actually do complain a lot about is the lack of attention to climate change. As I think our kids know better than we do in my generation, climate change is a really pressing priority that needs action and not just talk. The world is feeling the effects. We don't have time to go into all of the evidence that points to it, but I'll leave it at 96% of all scientists around the world are at idem. They're unanimous in their view that humans contribute to climate change and climate change is happening. And locally, we're not spared. Lake levels are at an unprecedented high. What used to be considered 1 in 100-year flood happened much more frequently than once a century. And we have been in a state of climate emergency now for a few years. We're one of many municipalities that had to declare such an emergency. So really what's important for the Thrive board, as well as the collaborative as a whole, is whatever decisions we are making, whatever initiatives we're proposing, we will put a climate change lens to them. And the goal is to contribute to some solutions as opposed to compounding the problem. The quote that you see at the bottom, I'm a lawyer, I teach law, and so the Supreme Court of Canada is my go-to reference source for a lot of things, but our highest court in a very recent decision said this in paragraph 2 of their decision. This was the carbon tax case. Climate change is real, full stop. It's caused by greenhouse gas emissions resulting from human activities, and it poses a grave threat to humanity's future. The only way to address the threat of climate change is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I don't know how much more clearly it can be stated. There is a problem, we're contributing to it, we have to be part of the solution. And that doesn't mean waiting for the United Nations to take care of it, or for China to get on with it, or to wait for the federal government to do more. Everybody has to play a part at each level of government, down to you and I and what we do. And so at Thrive, we're hoping to really foster a culture of thinking about climate change in all of the things that we do as a town. So as I mentioned earlier, Amherstburg declared a climate emergency in November of 2019 when we had those terrible floods that affected so many communities, neighborhoods in town. We're one of over 500 other municipalities in Canada that have had to do so. The declaration at the time in November of 2019 mentioned that the town would be embarking on a review of its official plan, but so far as we know, nothing has been done. There have been no investments made to address climate change in any of the recent budgets. And of course, there are things that could be done. So when people ask, you know, what can I do, or what can a small little town of Amherstburg do as far as addressing this gargantuan global problem? Well, one is to lead by example. So municipalities have a responsibility to lead the way by focusing on creating energy efficiency within its own operations. And so again, when we're as a group putting forward ideas to the town, this may be one of them. There is a regional energy plan that provides a really good, concise list of things that every municipality, including Amherstburg, can do to lead by example in terms of retrofitting its own buildings, switching to electric cars, investing in green energy, creating incentives for green energy. So that's one thing to do. Now, this Essex Regional Energy Plan was just approved unanimously by County Council last week, unanimously, so every town. And it was great to see our mayor and other representatives from Amherstburg really vocal at that meeting and championing some of these issues. So the next question is, what action will the town be taking to address the mandate that it endorsed in the regional energy plan? And so we're going to be educating ourselves. I'm not a climate scientist. Like Lisa said, none of us are experts in everything, and most of us are non-experts in everything. I'm not a climate scientist, but what I am aware of is litigation. And there is an ever-growing trend of climate justice-related litigation. I don't want to see the town caught in those crosshairs. Like I said, I want us to be proactive for the sake of our kids, for the sake of our own quality of life. So we want to keep council moving forward and not forget that this is a plan that they endorsed. And there are tons of ways that we can do it. So all of the other initiatives you've heard about so far tonight and others you'll hear of, all of them in some way can contribute positively to addressing greenhouse gas emissions. Obviously, cycling and open streets, walkability, planting trees, reducing parking in order to incentivize walkers and cyclists. All of these things are beneficial in their own right, but also have a positive impact in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And this is my final slide. And it's, I think, a concise way of looking at how other groups, other community groups, as well as cities and towns all over the world really think about climate change. You think about adapting to what has already been done. And unfortunately, there's already a lot of harm that's been caused by climate change. So we have to worry about adapting to the harm that's already been caused. Things like flood protection, infrastructure, building design, disaster management, having a plan, and not just being sitting ducks for the next major flood. But then there are things we can do to mitigate, to slow down the pace of climate change. And that kind of proactive stuff is also what we're going to be focusing on at Thrive. So looking at cycling, not just as a sport, not just as a leisure activity, but as an active way of transportation. You know, I live over by Middle Side Road. My daughter works at Sobeys. There's no reason why she shouldn't cycle to work. And so I'm going to be encouraging her to do that, although there are a few spots along the way that are going to be a little bit tricky and hazardous for her. I would love for it to be a safer way for her to get to work. We can talk about energy efficiency, as I said, leading by example in terms of the town's own buildings, but also incentivizing green economies, drawing people, because Amherstburg could be a town known for its attention to the environment and climate change, creating that kind of buzz that might attract green business as well. So lots to talk about, and happy to continue learning as we will have a tremendous opportunity to learn when Thrive's first speaker series starts with Claire Sanders just a few weeks from now.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, thank you. One question for you before we move on. Some people might ask and wonder why, because you've already talked about it, right? Climate change is a thing, and it's a big thing. And so, how does a small town like Amherstburg, do something? And why should we spend town funds to do it? You know, we have a lot of things we could be spending money on in the town. Why should climate change be one of them?
Well, let me just answer that question with the words of the task force chair from the Essex Regional Energy Plan. So there was that big meeting that happened last week. And in his words, the cost of doing nothing far exceed the cost of meeting the climate challenge head on. So if your only concern is dollars and cents, and you know, that isn't, I think that there's a lot more to having quality of life than simply looking at the bottom line. But I'm not an economist, so that's my bias. But if that's all you care about is the bottom line of dollars and cents, then know that not doing anything now is going to cost us more in the long run. It's going to cost our children more in the long run. So that's the short answer to, I think, a pretty complicated question. But politicians, scientists, you know, urbanists, everybody agrees on this. Sitting back and thinking the problem's too big and it'll either go away on its own or someone else is going to deal with it is just not a rational approach.
Great answer. Great answer. Fantastic. Thank you, Yasmika. Appreciate it. Again, questions for Yasmika, but we'll get to them at the end. Type them in and we'll take questions and comments at the end of the presentation. Next up, we have Lori talking about our history and protecting it.
Thanks, Dan. The history of Amherstburg is a key point of difference. There's no other place in Essex County that has a history so rich, that has a fort in the middle of town. And it is something that really, really makes us stand out. Recently, the Amherstburg Community Foundation did a survey and they found history to be the third reason why people like and visit Amherstburg. So if our vision is to be a tourist town, a draw like that definitely brings people to town, and it brings them to town to spend money. So the one thing though is that we've already lost quite a bit of our history. We've destroyed a lot of historical buildings. I walk past a parking lot just about every day when I'm in town that I know a historical building sat on, and it's an empty parking lot. So these are the things that we have to be cognizant of moving forward, that we start to protect our historical buildings and recognize that we need to preserve this for future generations. So I think that it's very important that the people of the town of Amherstburg, and especially custodians of these buildings, understand that championing and protecting these investments and supporting the heritage staff that is going to be coming on, I believe it's in July, so very, very shortly, in communicating with them with regard to how what the challenges are of owning and maintaining historical buildings will help us kind of gain a force to have the funds available and perhaps grants, budget dollars to continue to preserve these buildings. So this is a very important key difference to us, and the value in it is irreplaceable.
So Lori, you and a partner have recently purchased the 2A Automotive building. There's a lot of history in that building. Tell us about it.
Yes, there is, and it's still in it. So that particular building was built in 1879. So we're looking at, you know, moving on to a 150-year-old building. And it was actually a rebuild following the fire in town in 1875. It's very interesting as I read about the architectural points on it. The Amherstburg Echo reported things like the windows were imported from England, and the galvanized steel cornices over the windows were, and to this day, they're still in perfect condition. If you look at that, the rest of the building may be falling down around them, but they are in perfect condition. So it was quite a buzz when this building was, when it was raised back all the 150 years ago. And it's important to understand that it's still a really cool building under that. We will peel back some paint and dig in as soon as we can and start taking a look at what's there.
Now, you know my next question.
Yeah.
Can you share the plans? What are the plans with the building? Anything exciting happening?
Well, a lot of exciting things are going to be happening in that building. It's been left behind, but our focus now is to kind of waken that sleeping giant. It's been a little bit neglected over the years, but we really envision that area as being a very lively area where people can gather, where there's outdoor space, where 12 months out of the year, people will be able to enjoy the Murray Street corridor again.
It takes me to my next question, and I'll leave it at that. I know you don't want to share things, and that's fine. It's all good. I understand it. I'm in the business. So my next question for you, though, follows that point. What do you envision? What would you love to see happening to Murray Street in that block?
Well, as I read through the historical points and the things that we're very lucky to have, the Marsh Society have gathered all of this information for us. I would love to see that same vibe happening again. That building once housed a bank and a hardware store and a dry goods store, and there was a lot of density in the town at that time. So people really depended on that spot for sustainability. So I can envision somebody living downtown coming to that area, just feeling like they could walk the street and feeling the history of the town again.
Last question for you, Lori. What is your advice to those other folks that own historical buildings in town?
Well, I think that my best advice is speak up. Really, instead of letting your building go to ruin, champion for it. Make it known that you are a good custodian of that building and that you are ready to preserve its history. And we may need to speak to council about putting together grants to help with that, because it is a very expensive project. But if we encourage investment in it, then the town over the next few years could be completely refreshed and renewed. I think, again, really good communication with that heritage planner that is coming into town, because we have so many historical properties, is going to be key. That the picture here that you're seeing is Kirsten and Mark Herzog's building that was just kind of unveiled to us recently. And I mean, I must have myself stood in front of it for 20 minutes. It is absolutely beautiful. And a little bit of history behind that, it housed a liquor store, it housed a lawyer's office, a bank, which to me, all three of those go together very well. And people live there, have lived there from the early 1900s. So we're not only looking at commerce, we're looking at population density, and we're looking at the way that urban areas work. So these are very, very important things moving when we consider our sustainability as a town, when we consider climate, that people can just come downstairs and be able to access things like hardware stores and dry goods. So it's a really, really cool movement, and it is going to completely refresh our town.
I agree. They've done a great job with the building. Fantastic. Thank you, Lori. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to talk parking with Richard.
So Lori really set the stage in this. As she said, a lot of our history has been hollowed out by building parking lots. And like her, I walk down the streets, and there's huge gaps. You know, a really walkable neighborhood is continuous. It isn't, you walk a couple stores or buildings and then there's a big gap. And we're like a mouth of teeth with a lot of teeth missing. And that's because of parking. And I don't think most people realize, unless they start to want to build something, that Amherstburg has something called a parking minimums policy. And that's a law. We have that law in tons of communities. It started in about the 1930s in the United States. That law requires new businesses and residents to provide a number of new off-street parking spaces. Okay, so what's so bad about that? Well, there's numerous problems with it. They significantly raise the cost of construction. If you need to put in so many parking spots off street, you need land for that. So you might have a building that I want to do this, but all of a sudden I have to buy another 30% more land to build parking for it. And each parking spot costs north of $5,000 to do that. So it really raises the cost. If the cost gets too high, it prevents some projects from happening. There was a long debate. We've needed a hotel in town forever. It was almost derailed because of the parking minimums. And frankly, having run a couple hotels in my life, the number of parking spots they were made to put in far exceeds what a hotel needs. The other thing is that, it fills the town with empty, useless space. Yes, in peak periods, in big events, which the town does a very nice job on, yes, parking is in big demand, but the rest of the time it sits there as useless, empty space. And the final thing is we need the revenue for parks and fire protection and policing and all of those things. Parking lots do not contribute revenue the way a business does. Now, the interesting thing is, again, we go back to data here. I went back and looked at the rapidly growing trend where towns and cities across North America have eliminated parking minimums, and I could count 90 in North America, or reducing them, which was 30. So this is something that we will put together parking white paper on, because it's time to either dramatically reduce parking minimums or eliminate them.
So Richard, sorry, just to cut you off. So parking minimums, not parking spots. Just want to clarify.
No, yeah, it's, a lot of us believe we've got plenty of parking, but that's a big debate, and it's a debate in almost every town. Do you have enough parking? We're not saying right now that we should eliminate parking. We should probably do a parking study at some time to determine whether we do have enough parking. But we think almost absolutely for sure we've got enough parking. We don't need more, but we're not suggesting we cut parking. And I can tell you that's going on. One of the things I point to is Paris, with 140,000 parking spots, is going to reduce them to 70,000. And other towns from Oslo to Copenhagen have done that. So, but we're not talking about reducing parking spots. We're talking about not increasing more parking spots.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so I know something that is often brought up to me with this topic that we've brought up a few times now is a lot of the cities that you are citing are large cities. Paris, for example, just large centers. How does something like that compare to a small town like Amherstburg, though?
Well, I looked, and so listen, the United States is way ahead of Canada on eliminating parking minimums. But I looked, and we have Camrose, Yorktown, Winnipeg, Edmonton are all reducing parking spots, and eliminated, we have Calgary, Penticton, St. John. So it's happening in Canada as well right now.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So essentially, and another point that's been made is someone looking to start a project locally, like you said, they might need, according to code, 10 parking spots. That could drastically affect what they can do with that space. Like it can make a
well, they can eliminate it. And personally, I'm talking, Colleen and I were looking at putting in a community theater. Yeah. And I'm kind of glad I didn't with COVID, but at the time we looked at the space we needed was a couple $100,000 more for the space, and for the parking, it added up to $400,000 extra. And that was just, it broke the idea. And so that happens. We could lose, we have lost ideas because of parking minimums.
100%. Thank you, Richard. Who's the puppy in the background?
Pardon me?
Who's the puppy in the background?
Well, Beaumont wants to get out, so I'm going to go back to mute.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, next up we have Phil Roberts. Hello, sir.
Hello.
So as most may know, Phil is our retired director of parks here in town. And so parks is something he's very, very passionate about. But today talking about public art and why it's important.
Well, I'll tell you, I have just, I'm in my head, I'm screaming, literally screaming here with all of the great things that have come out of tonight's session. And one of the things that I think for me in getting to Thrive and the importance of it is that as a bureaucrat, and I've been a bureaucrat for a long time, but this municipality is hitting way above its weight class. And it's not realized, it's not recognized, and it's often very difficult to hit above your weight class. Jasminka, and, climate change, we've got park naturalization projects on the table, right? Warren Mickle Park, let's naturalize it. Big chunks of Ranta Park, let's naturalize it. We've got the open air and, talking about bike tourism and, the whole open air. As one of the main architects of open air, we did this in a pandemic. We did this in the middle of a pandemic. We had no idea, as the rules changed, right? And Renee and I started having my coffee Saturday mornings. They've already got bike tourism. Bike tourism has been going on there. And, there's a great opportunity to expand this, and as Tim has said, you got to connect these things. So I know it's getting late, and I'm going to switch to public art. And the public art piece for me was kind of a catalyst. I'm not an artist. I'm not an art critic. I'm a guy that has managed parks. I managed the airport. We had public art in the airport. And, you soon realize that there's a huge value to public art. And I think I'm going to be a bureaucrat here. And I'm going to say, if people say, well, you're putting public art in because, people are going to come and see it. It's a tourist thing. No, it's one of the many components that go into a downtown core. It's rebuilding, Kurzak's rebuilding a building to its I've forgotten the date of that building, Lori, sorry, but it's all of the little elements, and then you put this in it as well. It makes it an interesting space. So we just go to the next slide for a second. So this is pulling the curtain back. But for one, public art provokes thought. The other thing is it's 100% inclusive. You don't have to go to a building. You don't have to go to a museum. It's ever present. So you've got something that's thought provoking. It's ever present, and it brings life to a dull space potentially. So you can use spaces that really don't have much, but where it attracts people, where it becomes a tourist thing, where it becomes an economic driver, is because it's made your community, it's made your downtown, our downtown. And I don't live in Amherstburg. I have no investments in Amherstburg. I had the good fortune of running the parks and facilities and rec in the tourism department for a little over 2 years. But we have been going downtown Amherstburg for 40 years. And now more so, we're riding our butt. My wife won't let me have chicken wings unless I ride my bike there. And from Guesto, I can almost get there on a cycling trail, cycling network. So we're getting there. But the fact is, what is attracting people is the fact that you've made it an interesting space. And it can be whimsical. It can be storytelling that makes a point. So you have public art that is historical. And Lori talked about our history. And it does tell our story. And it reinforces, culture and achievements and community pride. Again, it makes it interesting. And you see a lot of this. This is actually one of the most common types of public art. When I was the director of parks for Windsor, a lot of these kind of public art displays were in parking lots. If you think of Rock Bottom, in the supermarket next to it, a close friend of mine, his dad, Howard Watkins, was, I think, the second a black man to be a full detective, and he's celebrated in this with a number of other people of color. You find little nooks and crannies, but this is very popular. Essex, for example, was one of the smallest municipalities that had murals all over the place and still has murals all over the place, and they do terrific. It was touted as an economic driver. I mean, signs on the 401, come and see the murals of Essex. But it makes Essex more interesting, and we know the stories. You've gone by the murals. We know the toll road story, right? When they burned the tolls down on Old Talbot. We know the stories of the train station and all of that history. But art has a way to be functional as well. Whimsical, brings fun, activity, engages people socially, draws attention to people areas, traffic calming. So I mean, hopscotch across an intersection, colorful walkways. This brings attention because now, in the sense of open air and open streets and making our downtown and making our main urban core a people place first, not a traffic place first. You know, you want these kind of traffic. You want these kind of things. A checkerboard table, I pictured Murray Street that had checkerboard tables painted on them, and you would bring, or we would have checkerboard pieces. So you and your neighbor could come down and play full stand-up checkers or chess on these. Why not use a closed street or even a currently open street as a canvas? So we considered this actually, even for some of the public display places, like where we were going to have performing arts. The intersection of Richmond and Dalhousie, there's a great opportunity there. If we go to the next slide, there's a great opportunity there to do something magical, you know, do something really impressive. Now, this is really impressive. I mean, I'm not sure that we were thinking on this scale, but we've got challenges too. You know, in the bureaucratic world, right? Is it slippery? What's the friction? You know, how does it weather? How much does it cost? How much does it cost to maintain? But you don't have to start off grandiose in the sense of public art. You just want it to be a cool place, because if it's a cool place, it attracts people. It attracts our residents. It attracts visitors. Nobody accidentally comes to Amherstburg. We're on the corner of the county. You're coming to Amherstburg, and people come to Amherstburg because we have beautiful parks, we have waterfront, and we're going to have performing arts. We're going to have those things. Next slide, please. Here's a couple of examples just of some of the public art that we currently have. You know, obviously Petty's have done a really great job in a building side mural. We've got the Legion, who's had a mural, again, very much telling our story pictorially, even the high school. You know, if you go into lot 10, the brewery, which again, I'm fairly familiar with, the mural that Dylan White has done needs to be interpreted, which is great. So the serving staff knows how to interpret the mural. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to finish with this. We've got some projects out there. Again, this was a catalyst. So you know, the comment about public performers, it was very difficult to do public performers. We actually have budget. Our tourism department has budget to engage public performers and to make this happen. We couldn't do it. So we went to council and we shifted that budget to say, let's make a rather unattractive space attractive. So this is just the very, very initial framework of the Privy Building that Richard and Colleen Petty have donated funds to a public art fund, essentially, and we're doing a mural. The theme of the mural as an initiative is basically celebrating the Detroit River as an international heritage river, which is not a common designation. And it's also celebrating it as an international wildlife refuge, which is the only designation between two international countries to have an international wildlife refuge. So this is actually going to become populated with more and more elements that deal with the natural history and also our natural heritage, Indigenous people, First Nations, you know, the economy of the Detroit River, Wablo, you know, and then we see sturgeon and eagles and things like that. Also, a nice little project happening at the 320 Richmond, the hub that's going in, which is going to be a Canada Day kind of collage, and it's underway. It'll be indoors, but for in certainly the public space of the building. So we're moving forward with this, and as a collective, I think this is one of these things that's telling a story. Maybe not so much of our achievements, but the interpretive panel that will go along with this is going to say to people, you're in a unique space, in an interesting space. And hopefully, as we can generate this on streets like Murray Street, right, which is pretty uninteresting right now. You know, the side of the Gordon House, right next to Navy Yard Park, there's a huge blank wall. Petty's have more mural projects. Lori has has concept for mural projects. You know, there are so many things that we can do. And again, drive interest, drive thought, drive people. Well, I'm sorry, Jasmine, let's not drive anybody. Let's have them cycle to downtown Amherstburg and take part in all of it, right? They're not coming to see this mural. They're coming to see this mural. They're coming to get an ice cream. They're coming to walk the Navy Yard Park. They're coming to watch bald eagles fishing in the river. And who knows, maybe they end up at Ricardo's or the Salty Dog for a dinner as well. So all part of our economy, all part of our culture. Thank you.
I love it, Phil. Thank you. I look at these initiatives for art. I know one of them that stands out for me is the functional art. I could totally picture myself hopscotching across the intersection. And I could see
well,
Darren
Winger, who is a bureaucrat like me, and he is listening. He sent me a chat. I don't know how to send a chat back because I'm a techno peasant. And he says, you know, the bike corrals, you know, we're finally getting into bike corrals. And you know, Tim did a little shout out for the fact that the town is engaged in this. We didn't have a place you can't ride your bike downtown because there's no place to lock it up. So we built bike corrals, and we're going to continue to build bike corrals, as I understand it, you know, with our new director of parks. But he said, why not make them public art? They're boring pieces of metal that you attach your bike to. The possibilities are endless. It's functional. So thank you, Darren. His wife, by the way, is Bike Windsor. If anyone was wondering, Darren's interest in biking as well. We're going to get better at this. And I think with this group, you know, and it's why my head's exploding. We're going to get better at this because we got like-minded people. We're thinking positively. We're not going to tear down the fact, you know, that it's public art. Open air, tear down open air because we got yellow cones up. You know, some of the stuff that came out of it was absolutely crazy. But anyway, great to be part of this, and I'm really looking forward to helping with some of these initiatives.
Thank you, Phil. You know, as everyone can see tonight, if there's anything that, you know, is really standing out, is the fact that the directors on the Thrive board are just so passionate. I know I'm proud to be part of this group, and you can just see it from everybody tonight. So thank you all for speaking. Can we jump to the next slide, Corey, please? So I'm going to remind everybody before I ask Lori to jump in here, we are going to take questions coming up next. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask, please put it in the chat, or just be ready to jump on screen and ask live and in person. So Lori, can you take the next screen?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. So the collective is a group that is going to publicly champion for a better Amherstburg. We're very transparent about that. We're a nonprofit enterprise. So actually, Richard and I funded the startup. So it is not a money-making enterprise at all. We started with a team of 12 directors. We are now 75 strong in a week. So people are understanding what our message is, and we're hoping that this just continues to expand and grow. My goal personally is to see 200 people, 200 voices speaking out in unison and agreeing to disagree sometimes, but being together for one cause. So the expectation here is simple. It's that we are going to engage in understanding all of the opportunities that are available to this town to make Amherstburg even better. Next slide, please. So becoming a member is very, very simple. For a couple or a family, it's $75. For an individual, it's $50, and students are free. So we want to make this not cost prohibitive for anybody, but just a small investment in some learning materials, There's a number of books that we've made available through sifting through different titles and reading them and determining which ones would be the most educational. And the purpose of those books is just so everyone has a foundation of what good urban planning is. This membership includes attendance to talks with authors and experts. And we have a beautiful list of experts coming, some of them with dates, some of them undated right now, but those will be for members only. And this, we will have continued education and governance and best practices. And members will have input regarding THRIVE initiatives. And moving forward, we're looking at creating white papers. So we need this input and we need your expertise. So just to wrap up what we're about, we looked at connecting the dots. So our initiatives, our values, our mission is all wrapped up in the way that we respect our health and the health of others, the way we move our bodies, express ourselves through art, use our streets and public spaces, embrace the desire to have excellent neighborhoods, protect our natural environment, and preserve our history. We know that if we truly engage with evidence, ideas, and a positive voice, our gift to our children and their children, our legacy, will spring from our actions as placemakers, builders, and guardians of the best town in Canada.
We'll take questions. So if anyone has questions, we'll definitely take those coming up next. One of them that I want to tackle once again, because Lori, you brought it up. It was brought up after our first presentation. Someone had asked, what are we doing with the funds? So again, membership is $50 per person, $75 per family. No one's making money. This is a not-for-profit. Lori, do you want to touch base on that a little bit further?
We've got some very, very high quality speakers coming in, and speakers aren't free, whether they Zoom or they arrive by plane, train, or automobile. They to get the good quality speakers to come in, we will need to pay them. So as I had mentioned, it's been privately funded to start up, and the funds from the membership have gone toward and they're sitting in the local Libro, if anybody. So, and that's what that little reserve is for, to pay for those materials moving forward, so we can get everybody on the same page in terms of educating them and providing the best resources to our membership.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. Anyone have any specific questions? I know, Rob, you made a comment. I think I see you on screen there, Rob. You made a comment about the naturalizing existing municipal green space. You want to touch base on that a little bit further?
Yeah, sure. Actually, what I would love to see is a effort to kind of, as you said, naturalize green space. The lawns that we're cutting by roads, of course, there has to be a buffer legal wise, but I think there is a lot of green space that Amherstburg is cutting right now that it doesn't have to be. And it would be great, especially for the climate initiative, to kind of get on board and really push to naturalize a lot of this area. All of these lawns that are being cut, that are it's kind of a waste, and all the carbon emissions by lawnmowers, and it would save the town money over the long run. It's been done in a lot of other municipalities. There is a little bit of a fight that has to go on because currently right now, I believe there is a law, I would have to look into it, that you can't just leave an area to go naturalize on its own. It has to be a certain protocol and a certain steps. So it'd be great to look into that more and kind of get the ball rolling, and to push our government to at least look into that more, and maybe change some of the laws, that there could be more naturalization in around town of Amherstburg, and show the government it's a cost savings as well in the long run. And it is beautiful. Like I know a lot of citizens are they like to see cut lawns, but I think the one time I think we had the strike in Windsor, things did kind of renaturalize on its own, Dieppe Park and so forth, and people started appreciating that. So that's one thing I would like to see, I guess. Thanks.
Sure. Phil, do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, great initiatives. And it actually is the goal of many municipalities, including this municipality, to reduce the area that you're cutting. It is controversial. You do get a lot of pushback from residents. There is sort of an expectation of manicure. This often becomes one of those things, and I think one of the reasons that Thrive needs to thrive is really from the fact that we can be a voice to counter some of that, not in my backyard kind of scenario. In park design and in a couple of projects that I actually mentioned, big elements of those park designs, and they will go up for public consultation. But the Ranta Park project, which is on the books, and the Warren Mickle Park project, actually is really about reducing the lawn footprint, is about naturalizing shallow ephemeral ponds, tree planting, lots of reducing carbon footprint, but also some opportunities to sequester carbon in big park senses. And the last thing I'll throw out is Amherstburg actually has a surplus of parkland, and not even so much, let's not even talk about community parks, but we from an ecotourism standpoint, from the Big Creek in the wetlands that we have, the Libro secondary plan, unfortunately, Amherstburg wasn't successful in getting a project for a nature trail, but already there is a great concept to naturalize big areas of that property and to continue to further enhance those naturalized areas, which not only were respected by me, but are being respected by the new director and moving that forward. So these are great initiatives, and I think we got to find every opportunity. But I can almost assure you, Rob, that in any of the park plans that you'll see coming forward as they go to public consultation are going to have elements at least for tree planting and at least for areas of naturalization.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. Dog barking in the background. Sorry about that. Anyone else have any questions? Finn's very excited for the dog park. As you can hear in the background, that resonated with him very much. So awesome. Yeah, what a great discussion tonight. I want to thank everyone again for coming out. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to Thrive. Our website is thriveamherstburg.com, and we're on social media. Make sure you like the Facebook page and our other social media pages as well. It's pretty important to keep informed as we go along. And as Lori mentioned, our white papers that will come along throughout the next months and then some, which we hope will be very informative for everyone. But I think if no one else has any more questions, we'll call it there. It's been a little longer than we anticipated, but we appreciate everyone hanging in there with us tonight. And again, thank you all for coming, and thanks to all the directors for speaking tonight and being involved. Definitely means a lot to all of us. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you all soon.